What if I told you that trees don't actually grow from the ground at all? I know, it sounds wrong, like one of those internet myths that falls apart the second you think about it. But stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to see trees, and the entire world around you, in a completely different way. Picture a massive tree. Maybe a giant oak in a park, or a towering pine stretching into the sky. It weighs thousands of pounds. Now ask yourself a simple question: where did all that mass come from? The obvious answer feels like it must be the soil, right? The tree is rooted in the ground, it drinks water from the earth, it must be pulling material up and turning it into wood. That's what most people assume. But here's the twist that fascinated physicist Richard Feynman and turns this whole idea upside down: almost none of a tree's mass comes from the ground. Let's slow down and think about it like a detective story. Imagine you plant a small seed in a pot with a fixed amount of soil. You water it, give it sunlight, and over time it grows into a much larger plant. If the plant gained all its mass from the soil, then the soil should lose a significant amount of weight, right? But experiments going all the way back hundreds of years showed something strange. The soil barely changes. So if the mass isn't coming from the ground, where is it coming from? Here's where things start to get really interesting. The answer is the air. Yeah. The invisible air around you, the stuff you don't even think about, is what trees are actually made of. Now that sounds even crazier, so let's break it down. The air is full of a gas called carbon dioxide. You breathe it out every time you exhale. It's just floating around, completely invisible. But plants have a way of grabbing that gas and using it as raw material. Through a process called photosynthesis, trees take in carbon dioxide from the air, combine it with water, and, using energy from sunlight, rearrange those atoms into something new, solid matter. Wood, leaves, bark. The entire structure of the tree. Think about that for a second. The solid trunk you can knock on with your hand used to be a gas floating in the air. Feynman loved explaining things like this because it flips your intuition. We tend to think of solids as real and gases as almost nothing. But physics doesn't see it that way. Matter is matter, whether it's a solid, liquid, or gas. The atoms don't care what form they are in. A carbon atom in the air is just as real as a carbon atom in a tree trunk. Here's a simple way to picture it. Imagine you had a magical camera that could track individual atoms. You'd watch carbon atoms drifting randomly in the air, bouncing around invisibly. Then one of them gets pulled into a leaf through tiny openings called stomata. Inside the leaf, powered by sunlight, that atom gets locked into a molecule of sugar. Later, that sugar becomes part of the tree's structure, maybe part of a branch, or a root, or the trunk itself. So the tree isn't growing from the ground. It's building itself out of the sky. Now let's make this even more mind-blowing. Over time, a tree becomes huge, right? Tons of solid material. But almost all of that came from carbon dioxide, which is a tiny fraction of the air. It's like building a skyscraper out of something so thin you can't even see it. And the ground? It's mostly just there to anchor the tree and provide water and a few nutrients. Important, yes, but not the main source of mass. The soil is more like a support system, not the building material. This is the kind of thing Feynman would point out to show how easily our intuition can mislead us. We see roots digging into the earth and assume that's where the substance is coming from. But the real action is happening in the leaves, in sunlight, in the invisible exchange between the tree and the atmosphere. Let's take it one step further with a thought experiment. Imagine sealing a young tree inside a perfectly controlled glass chamber. You give it sunlight, water, and a measured amount of carbon dioxide. As it grows, you carefully track everything. Over time, the tree gains mass. Where did it come from? The carbon dioxide levels in the chamber drop. The atoms didn't appear out of nowhere, they were simply rearranged. This is one of the deepest ideas in physics and chemistry: conservation of matter. Nothing is created or destroyed, it just changes form. The tree isn't magically producing mass, it's collecting atoms from its environment and reorganizing them into something new. And this doesn't just apply to trees. It applies to you. Every part of your body comes from the same process. The carbon in your muscles, your bones, your skin, it all came from the food you eat, which ultimately came from plants, which got it from the air. So in a very real sense, you are made of air that has been transformed through a chain of life. That's not poetic. That's literal. Now think about what happens when a tree burns. All that solid wood turns into ash, heat, and gases. Most of the mass goes back into the air as carbon dioxide. The same atoms that once floated in the atmosphere became part of a tree, and then returned again. It's like a giant cycle, constantly moving atoms around the planet. Trees are just one phase in that cycle, a temporary arrangement of matter. Feynman had this incredible ability to take something ordinary and reveal the hidden story behind it. A tree isn't just a plant growing from soil. It's a machine powered by sunlight, pulling invisible atoms from the air and assembling them into structure. It's physics in action, chemistry in motion, all happening quietly around us every day. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Next time you walk past a tree, don't just think of it as something rooted in the ground. Think of it as something reaching into the sky, capturing pieces of the atmosphere and turning them into life. Every leaf is like a tiny factory, every branch a record of atoms gathered over time. Even the phrase, growing from the ground, starts to feel misleading. The ground is just part of the story. The real source is everywhere, all around you, in the air you're breathing right now. And here's the beautiful part. This idea connects everything. The air, the trees, the food you eat, your own body, it's all part of the same system. The same atoms moving, changing, rearranging, never disappearing, just taking on new forms. That's the kind of perspective that science gives you. It doesn't just answer questions, it changes how you see the world. So the next time someone says trees grow from the ground, you'll know the deeper truth. They grow from the air, from sunlight, from the invisible building blocks of the universe, quietly assembling themselves one atom at a time. And if something as solid as a tree can come from something as invisible as air, it makes you wonder what else we're completely misunderstanding about the world around us. If this changed the way you see something as simple as a tree, hit like, subscribe for more ideas that flip your perspective, and let me know in the comments what everyday thing you want to understand next. Because sometimes, the most ordinary things are hiding the most extraordinary truths.